The end of 2020 is upon us, but before we begin a whole new year, some loose ends need to be tied up, namely the shows that I watched for Red Hot Go. Throughout the year, I've tried out a new show every fortnight, and some of them went on to be favourites. So in this roundup, I will be going through every piece of media that I did an episode of Red Hot Go for, and tell you how I went with it after the episode aired. Please note that I will not be spoiling any of these shows, although I will speak vaguely about what the narrative achieves following the first 3 episodes. With that out of the way, let's get started with High School Girl. High School Girl was my very first Red Hot Go, and it wound up making a very decent first impression. Lacking self-control, I finished the first season before I had even recorded the video. The temptation to change the script following that binge is what led to creating a rule that I had to publish the Red Hot Go before I watched anything beyond those first 3 episodes. In the video, I spoke about games being a form of escapism. As the story continued, it explored the concept more thoroughly, showcasing both positive and negative aspects to that escapism. In a story like this, you'd imagine that the narrative would pressure the main character to distance themselves from games and grow up. But High School Girl acknowledges that one is not necessary to achieve the other. The growth of the main character never involves giving up games, but rather re-evaluating his priorities. As a mid-20s gamer, that's a message I can get behind. High School Girl started with a score of boiling, but for its loving portrayal of the positive aspects of video games and how they better people's lives, I upgrade that rating to Red Hot. Kaguya-sama, Lover's War. I started Red Hot Go with 2 goals in mind: to have a formula that I could execute quickly, allowing me more time to work on analysis videos, and to increase my media input to discover new favourites. The Red Hot Go for Lover's War accomplished both goals, as it is now one of my favourite shows of all time, and I likely wouldn't have given it a chance had I not wanted to make a Red Hot Go for it. In the video, I said I wanted 2 things: less dialogue-based exposition and more moments of self-awareness. And the show delivers in both respects. Following introductions, the narrator only appeared to ham up exchanges between characters, and as the show goes on, both Shinomiya and Shirogane let their feelings evolve and reveal to the audience why they are reluctant to confess in the first place. I would have rated Lover's War red hot at the time, and if season 3 is as good as the manga suggests it will be, I might just need a higher rating. Pokemon. Pokemon was the first show on Red Hot Go that I decided to drop. Not because it was boring or poorly made, but because I couldn't wrap my head around how much more there was. I wound up watching 3 more episodes after the Red Hot Go went live, and I had a good time doing so. But I ultimately stopped when it was time to watch the next show, and I never picked it back up again. I would rate Pokemon as boiling and recommend it to anyone who is interested in older anime or who aren't intimidated by long-running series. I must repeat, I did not drop this show because it failed to entertain, which makes a controversial segue to the next show. Rascal does not dream of a bunny girl senpai. The Red Hot Go video for Bunny Girl Senpai was nerve-wracking to create and upload, as it was the first predominantly negative video I had ever made for my channel. Still, I had to be honest to my experience. And my experience with Bunny Girl Senpai was tiring. The show was boring, not because it was too mature for me, but because it was emotionless, pretentious, and sometimes downright incoherent. It was the flat acting in particular, the vain and childish attempt to appear like a show for grown-ups that made this anime so tedious. I rate the show ice cold, and now I never have to think about it again. Hyouka. I was wrong about the lost uncle being the penultimate mystery of the show. That was an assumption I made based on my understanding of modern anime tropes, but eventually I came to realise that once the main cast solved the mystery behind the anthology Hyouka, her uncle was never brought up again. Speaking of which, the scene in which they solved that mystery is so well executed. It was dramatic, emotional, satisfying, and I would recommend that you pick up the show just so that you can experience that revelation. The episode-length mysteries I love so much eventually became huge arc-spanning mysteries, some of which took 4 or 5 episodes to play out. I never got to experience figuring out the answer for myself again. Most of the time I just had no idea what was going on until the protagonist put the pieces together. I'm not sure if that was the mystery writing getting worse or just my frame of mind while watching. Single episode length mysteries did make a comeback towards the end of the show, but that leads me to my biggest gripe: the ending. I understand that some anime only exist to sell manga, and Hyouka appears to be one of those cases, but the final episode was so anticlimactic, hosting the dullest mystery of the show and featuring all our main characters in an ambiguous state. I rate this show chilly. If I ever do decide to rewatch Hyouka, I will likely watch until the Hanging Man mystery, and then stop. My youth romantic comedy is wrong, as I expected. After doing the Red Hot Go for MYR, I watched a fair few episodes, and they were even alright. A conflict between the core characters meant that there were no more dull scenes between Hachiman and Yukino, so the show addressed my primary complaint, and I was able to watch along as Yui and the other students did their thing. It even somewhat explored the protagonist's isolation, and his insight as a loner actually contributed to the story, which was interesting to see. It is a show that I wound up dropping, but not for any particular reason. I just kind of stopped watching and forgot about it until it was time to write this script. A soft drop, if you will. So despite not being as painful to watch as something like Bunny Girl Senpai, it still didn't hold my interest. I would have rated it lukewarm, and I don't think it ever managed to change my mind. Railgun. The Red Hot Go for Railgun was somewhat desperate. I'd given ambiguous or negative verdicts 3 times in a row by then, and I was worried that the audience would get as exhausted by the negativity as I had become. I was so desperate to cover something I liked again that I honestly considered scrapping the Railgun script and trying a different show. However, I stuck to my guns and released the video regardless. Despite the criticisms I made against Railgun, I still think I went too easy on it. But I'm about to make up for that. On the night that I uploaded the Red Hot Go, I sat down to watch episode 4. Halfway through, I realised that I was so bored that I would rather watch anything else. Since the dodgy morals and Kuroko's obsessive behaviour ensured that I had no goodwill towards the show at that point, I stopped watching, and I haven't thought about it since. I rated it lukewarm at the time, but throughout half an episode that rating plummeted to ice cold. The Promised Neverland. The Promised Neverland was a much-needed breath of fresh air. It expertly created tension and intrigue throughout its run, and you were never quite sure what was going to happen next. I completed this show and loved every moment of it. I don't want to say much more for fear of spoiling it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, so all I'll say is that this show retains its red hot rating, and I highly recommend that you watch it. Mob Psycho 100. I was wrong in regards to the first season being about Mob's social development in general, but it did focus on some key relationships, which was interesting to see. One aspect of the show that surprised me was Reagan. I assumed from the first 3 episodes that he was simply a selfish person using Mob for his own ends. While that is true to an extent, it became clear later in the show that he does genuinely care about Mob and his emotional well-being. One small part of the show that stood out to me was just how protective of Mob the Body Improvement Club is. It showed that even though he was socially incompetent, the fact that he was trying to better himself was enough for people to respect him, and I like that as a message. The show was rated red hot, and that rating has not changed. I'll probably get around to watching the next season eventually, but if you want me to get to it sooner, you could always suggest the second season for a red hot go. Wink wink, nudge nudge. Pet Girl of Sakurasou. Pet Girl of Sakurasou is an average show. It consistently gets bogged down with pervy anime crap and deviates from what makes it great to focus on its lesser elements. We didn't need a love triangle, or a bureaucratic conspiracy, or the vapid erotica that was included merely for fan service. But I'm only banging on about the ways this show fails because it distracts from the aspect it got so right. In my video, I talked about the theme of passion, and it was an omnipresent theme throughout the entire show. We do see Sarita find his passion, but then learn to deal with the pain that passion can bring. We see Nanami destroy her physical health in pursuit of her dreams, and how her determination became detrimental. We see the disparity of skill between Mashiro and the main character, as well as the social rift it creates. We see the core characters despair when they believe that the pursuit of their goals is over, and they are ready to resign themselves to a life of emotional mediocrity. Like I said in the original video, you don't often see anime where a student struggles with passion, and Pet Girl of Sakurasou goes all in and explores every facet of that idea. As impressed as I am with how the show managed its core themes, I still rate it as lukewarm since it had a lot of garbage that distracted from them. Your Lie in April. Unbeknownst to me when I made this video, Your Lie in April is considered a masterpiece that is essential viewing for any anime fan, and by the end of the first season I could certainly see why this is the case. Kosei's journey was engaging, Kaori's story was emotional, and the intricate detail put into the performance animations were downright breathtaking and just exuded a passion for music. However, there is one part of the show that I simply cannot overlook. Beyond the first 3 episodes, we see more extreme instances of nasty behaviour that Kosei faced at the hands of his mother. However, towards the middle of the first season, we get an arc about her. This arc seemingly wants us as an audience to say, I get it now. She was only mean because she cared so much. And frankly, that's disgraceful. Regardless of her motivation, Kosei's mother was a nasty, manipulative abuser, and the fact that this show tries to sell the narrative that it all came from a place of love is downright disgusting. Perhaps because of this, Your Lie in April just didn't have as profound an effect on me as it seems to have had on other people. Maybe I'll change my mind if I ever get around to watching season 2, let me know in the comments if you want me to cover that in another Red Hot Go. However, for the time being, I rated this show as lukewarm, and despite the disgust I feel over the handling of Kosei's mother, there is still enough good stuff here to keep that rating from going down. Quintessential Quintuplets. I said at the end of my Quintessential Quintuplets video that it had 1 or 2 more episodes to draw me in, and I'll be damned if it didn't get close to doing so. Episodes 4 and 5 make the implication that Futaro will eventually become a part of their family dynamic, and that's a mighty fine premise for a story, one that I would even be excited to watch. So what made me drop the show after episode 5? Harem garbage, of course. The never-ending stream of accidental groping, unconsenting proximity, and contrived scenarios that only ever happen in harem anime. As I said in the Red Hot Go, Quintessential Quintuplets knows precisely what kind of show it wants to be, and I'm just not into it. My rating for the show started as chilly and stays there. It would have been ice cold if not for the genuinely delightful moments sprinkled in among the generic harem trash. K-On! Of all the shows I have discussed so far, my feelings towards K-On! Are the most baffling. Looking at it as objectively as I can, it's not all that good. The easy outs I complained about in my original video are all over the broader narrative, and you never really notice any organic change within the core characters. K-On! Has a real aversion to confrontation. It sidesteps most of its conflict without much effort on behalf of the characters, and there are no lasting consequences. As a result, I nearly soft-dropped the show a few times. However, the baffling part comes with the fact that I enjoyed the show despite the lack of real conflict. I'd say that it comes down to nostalgia for the serene dynamic between the core characters. It may be dull from a narrative standpoint, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of our friend groups are like this, and I think that cozy reflection of reality is what draws people to K-On! It would be nice if they hadn't copped out on most of the show's conflicts, or if we could have seen some better character development, but I suppose in this world, those things just work themselves out, and who am I to deride a show where everything is just nice? I rated this show boiling, but since it didn't meet the potential that the first 3 episodes suggested, that rating has gone down to lukewarm. Maybe the show will click for me if I get around to watching season 2. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to cover that in another Red Hot Go. Tonikawa, Over the Moon for You. Having watched 12 episodes of Tonikawa, I can safely say that my Red Hot Go was way off the mark. I both overestimated and underestimated its quality in the video, and I'd like to take a moment to correct the misinterpretations I made. For starters, my concerns over a love triangle and generic teen angst were unnecessary. The former only comes up once and is swiftly dealt with, while the latter doesn't amount to anything. My speculation on a character arc for Nasa, or an exploration of the theme that his name represents, also amounts to nothing. NASA loses all of the arrogance that made him enjoyable after the accident, and the idea of achieving impossible feats never comes up again. We don't even really learn much about who Tsukasa is, where she came from, why she waited so long to find NASA, or why she was so keen to get married in the first place. So if this isn't a show about an arrogant NASA becoming a better person, or a mysterious Tsukasa becoming less a mystery, then what is the purpose of this anime? Well, ultimately it's a pure slice of life between two people who got married without knowing each other. They eat meals together, create memories, and navigate regular relationship milestones. Despite some side characters adding a bit of spice, it's all rather mundane. The show is undoubtedly delightful, but in a fairy floss kind of way. It's colourful and sweet and nice to consume, but there isn't anything to bite into, no substance or any reason to recall it once you've finished. Given that it didn't fall into the usual trappings of other romance anime and made up for the lack of character development with cute scenes, I had half a mind to bump the rating up, but I'm not going to. Because Tsukasa is still only 16 and there is absolutely no reason that she couldn't have been Nasa's age, so this show retains its rating of lukewarm. Rent-a-Girlfriend. My hope that the harem garbage would dissipate over the story did not come to fruition. Also, the ending annoyed the hell out of me. Right before the credits, something happens. A declaration is made that could have potentially changed everything. And then as soon as the credits are over, the show bails and takes back the declaration. It screams that the writer wanted a big climactic moment to end the series on, but didn't want to commit to the consequences of that climax. It's a dumb cop-out that left a dreadfully sour taste in my mouth. However, the show did manage to ease my other concerns. At no point does the narrative degrade those in the escort industry, and Mami has just enough nuance to avoid the all exes are crazy trope. It also takes a somewhat grounded look into what a failed love life can look like, the devastating effect it can have on people, and even why the escort industry can be beneficial to them. But when I look back at my time watching Rent-a-Girlfriend, the thing I remember most is just how confronting it was. Now, I'm confident that no one intended for this show to be confronting, however, there is one aspect in particular that spoke to me in a very personal way, and that is Kazuya's infatuation with Mami. Every facet of my logical mind tells me that Kazuya getting back together with Mami would be a mistake. She's conniving, mean, manipulative, and Kazuya's feelings for her come across as more obsessive than loving. But knowing that didn't change the fact that I wanted to see them get back together. That says something about me. It shows that I'm still carrying some personal baggage that I was convinced I had left behind some years ago. No other anime mentioned in this video has ever exposed such a sad reflection of myself, so I have to give Rent-a-Girlfriend props for doing so. Had the show been a little lighter on the pervy harem garbage and not resorted to a cop-out ending, I would have rated it red hot, but since it did those things, the rating remains boiling. Golden Time. Where do I even start with Golden Time? Well, it has the most vapid, useless OPs of any shows in this video. I mean, the first OP amounts to Coco looking infatuated, and the second OP amounts to Coco looking sad. I suppose the second OP's song would make an intense Beat Saber level, but that's hardly praiseworthy. As the OP suggested, this show does involve a romantic relationship between Coco and Banri. While they are undoubtedly cute together at times, and I'm glad that they get together within the first half of the show, I cannot for the life of me tell you what Banri ever saw in Coco. All he knows about her at the time he asks her out is that she's dangerously obsessive. Speaking of which, that aspect of her character is never explicitly addressed. The obsession is toned down as the show continues, but at no point is it directly called out, challenged, or reflected upon. In some ways, other characters even treat it as admirable behaviour, which is a big yikes from me. Fans of the show are probably dreading a low rating, but despite those gripes, I immensely enjoyed Golden Time. All of the side characters I mentioned in my video got some kind of arc or faced some kind of conflict. Once Mitsuo is free of Coco, he struggles in his other romantic endeavours. While 2D-kun doesn't have much growth, I was surprised to see him become a larger part of the story. I was so sure that he was an occasional background character that I didn't even mention him in the Red Hot Go. Linda's role in the story is spectacular. I enjoyed every second that she was on screen. The only shortfall of the show when it comes to side characters is Chinami. While she does get a pretty decent character arc, it never really concludes, which is a bit of a shame. As for the core theme I speculated on in the Red Hot Go, the show didn't explore Coco's sense of self very much, beyond having her admit that she can be annoying or intense. However, the conflict that Banri hinted at did become the central conflict of the show. The idea that Banri is another person following the accident is thoroughly explored and eventually affects every other facet of the show. The other major part of the story is the relationship relationship between Banri and Coco, and I think that the narrative pulled it off rather well. They get into some pretty severe arguments and doubt their worth to each other, but the ways they navigate these tense moments are always heartfelt. While as a whole, Golden Time isn't better than Toradora, the relationship between Banri and Coco is certainly more nuanced than that between Ryuji and Tiger. So despite not exploring all the themes I hoped it would and having the worst OPs of all the anime I am covering, the show is fantastic. With the way it arranged the pieces it made in those first few episodes, I gladly upgrade Golden Time's rating from boiling to red hot. If you're a fan of Toradora or romance in general, I highly recommend giving this one a watch. Charlotte. My biggest wish for Charlotte following the first 3 episodes was that I could watch Yu suffer for being an intolerable dirtbag. To see him brought down a peg and realise that he is not the centre of the universe. The show provided this beatdown so well that I wound up feeling kinda sorry for him. The tone of the show takes a dramatic shift at the halfway point. One of those tonal shifts that has you sit there with your jaw agape for a moment while you process what has just happened. And while that tonal shift isn't permanent, it does keep things bleak for longer than I would have expected. As a result, we do see Yu transform from a selfish abuser of his abilities to someone who is selfless to an almost self-destructive degree. You see him get to know the fellow student council members and come to respect them as peers and see them respect him in kind. Throughout this show, Yu changed from a character who I loved to hate to someone that I just loved in general. In my original video, I said that Charlotte was about how a traditional society would exploit those with powers. Well, Sammy said it, but I wrote it into the script. As the show continues, the narrative takes this idea one step further. The ultimate message of Charlotte seems to be that superpowers are detrimental to everyone, to the powered individuals, to the people around them, and society at large. Now, Charlotte is hardly the first piece of superhero media to make this claim, but it may be the first to go all in the way it does. What do I mean by that? Well, you'll just have to watch the show to find out. Charlotte retains its red hot rating, and it is another show that I highly recommend you watch. To finish this video, I thought it would be fun to rank every anime I've watched for Red Hot Go this year. From my least to most favourite, Bunny Girl Senpai, Railgun, Hyouka, My Youth Romantic Comedy, Quintessential Quintuplets, K-On!, Pokemon, Your Lie in April, Pet Girl of Sakurasou, Rent a Girlfriend, Tonikawa, Golden Time, High School Girl, Charlotte, Mob Psycho 100, Promised Neverland, and my favourite of 2020 is of course Kaguya-sama Love is War. Red Hot Go has been such a resounding success that it will undoubtedly be coming back in 2021. Make sure that you check the Google Sheets link in the description to see every show that has been suggested by my audience. If there's a show that you want me to cover that's not on that list, you can suggest it via the comments or Discord server. Otherwise, if you see a show on the list that you would also like me to cover, let me know. The more names a suggestion has next to it, the more likely I am to choose it next. One last thing. I will no longer be accepting requests for shows that are currently airing, because starting with winter 2021, I will be watching and discussing seasonal anime, so I hope you'll look forward to a first impressions video in late January. And that is it for Red Hot Go Roundup 2020. I'd like to thank my patrons, Orion Tran, Quincy Chamberlain, German5, Lars Espen, Shark, Data52, Nerks U, Pix Caliber, Alberto Cruz, Tyler Bennett, Tenka, and Jeremy Bashik. If you too would like to support me further, you can do so at patreon.com/BehindBigJoe. Thank you all very much for an incredible 2020, and I will see you in 2021.